They came across the ocean bound in chains, with hearts torn from home. They were stripped of names, dignity, and freedom, and when their bodies landed in a strange land, some chose the grave over bondage. This is the story of Igbo landing, of courage, sorrow, and tragic resistance. Chapter 1. From Igbo land to the Black Ships. Long before 1803, many Igbo people lived in what is now southeastern Nigeria. Their communities had social systems, spiritual beliefs, and language and culture that bound them together over the centuries. As European traders and later slave traders reached the western African coast, the Igbo region and neighboring lands became one of many tragic sources of human suffering in the Atlantic slave trade. The Atlantic slave trade violently uprooted many Igbo from their homeland. From the bite of a Biafra region, captors took thousands, forcing them across the Middle Passage in horrific conditions of overcrowding, disease, starvation, and despair. In this brutal trade, many Igbo lost their lives even before reaching the New World, but some survived. Among those survivors were a group of Igbo captives who would arrive in Savannah, Georgia in 1803, souls destined for further torment, but who would soon make history. Chapter 2. Arrival, Purchase, and Transfer. When the captives reached Savannah, they were bought by plantation agents John Cooper and Thomas Spaulding. The transaction price was about $100 per person, but they were not yet at their final place of torment. The captors put them aboard a smaller coastal vessel, often identified as the schooner York, or in some records the Morovia, to transport them down the Georgia coast towards St. Simon's Island, where Cooper's and Spaulding's plantations are waited. On the deck, in darkness, chained, fearful, they endured the final stretch of their voyage. Many must have thought what horrors awaited us now so near. Chapter 3. The Revolt at Sea. During that coastal voyage, something extraordinary happened. The captive Igbo, in one of the few recorded rebellions during a forced transfer, rose up. They attacked their captors, and in the struggle, some of the captors were drowned. The ship itself ran aground in or near Dunbar Creek, a small tributary of the coast of St. Simon's Island. Whether they seized it before or after landing is unclear, but accounts agree that by the time of this embarkation, the captives had overpowered their captors. Some stories say that about 75 Igbo took part in the revolt. This act of defiance may have been fueled by both desperation and pride. After surviving the horrors to get this far, they would not be enslaved passively. Chapter 4. March ashore and the High Chief. When they reached land at Dunbar Creek Marches, the group marched ashore, reportedly led by one of their chiefs. They worked together in unity. The land was marshy, filled with brackish water, grasses, and unstable ground. To step into that swamp would be to cut death, but they believed that death might be better than bondage. They sang in chorus as they walked. In some versions of the story, they sang in Imbo, chanting, "The water spirit brought us here. The water spirit will take us home." This phrase carries deep symbolism. Water had brought them forcibly across the ocean, and so they invoked the same waters to return them to their ancestral home in death. Chapter 5. Into the waters, the mass suicide. At the command of their leader, as the accounts say, the group walked hand in hand into Dunbar Creek. Step by step, they submerged themselves, choosing death by drowning rather than life as enslaved persons. The numbers are uncertain. 13 bodies were officially recovered by white overseers who ventured into the creek to retrieve them, but the total number of those who perished is unknown. Some may have survived, some bodies were never found, some may have escaped or been recaptured later. Among those who died may have been women, men, perhaps children, though the records do not specify their voices. Their identities are lost to history. The act itself was a deliberate assertion. Better to die free than live enslaved. Chapter 6: Pain, Reflection, and Remembrance. Imagine the dread each captive felt upon reaching the new world. Weary, bruised, stripped of identity. Then imagine the spark of revolt, the courage to fight, even when chained, even when hope was thin, to march ashore, face the march, and choose the river's embrace over a life of enslavement. That is a sorrow too deep to contain in words. They sang, they marched, they submerged, they died, not with cries of surrender, but with a final declaration they would not be property. In the centuries since, many would forget, others would reduce the events to folklore. Yet descendants listened, told the story, sang the song, passed on the memory. In recognizing Igbo landing today through markers, historical research, cultural memory, we affirm those lives and their refusal. We listen again to their song, their pain, their dignity. Epilogue. The Igbo landing is not an easy story. It is a story of loss, horror, and despair. But it is also a story of resistance, spiritual power, and memory. Though we cannot restore their names, we can hold their hearts in prayer and remembrance. Though centuries have passed, their voices echo in the waters. Let us remember them, the Igbo captives who, chained and oppressed, chose to walk into the marsh and drown, asserting that the soul cannot be enslaved. The end. When